Well, hello, everybody. We have a very special guest with us today. We have Mr. Judge Joe Brown. He's known as Judge Joe Brown. He hosted a TV show for a very long while. He is a retired judge as well, and he is someone who I believe is a very important voice, especially for African Americans and the current social and cultural moment that we're in right now. And so I don't like to introduce my guest myself because I think everyone is their own best spokesperson. So, Judge, I would like to give you some time to say a few words about yourself and introduce yourself.
I'll just say this. You don't have to say Mr. Judge. The judge is a title. After I got elected to my second 8-year term, the governor sent me a certificate, said I could use that title for life. So Judge Joe Brown it is, not Mr. Judge Joe Brown. But other than that, if you want to see what I'm about, some extent, you can Google me. They've got me on Wikipedia too. I won't bore anybody, but we might touch on some of the highlights as we talk. Now,
Of course.
let's see. Professional career, went to UCLA as an undergrad, had a science major there, then wound up switching to political science. That had to do with some interesting issues back in the 60s. Went to UCLA Law School, practiced poverty law, interned at a DC think tank, worked with EEOC, was the first Black prosecutor for the city of Memphis. Then I was the chief public defender and ran the PD's office. Went into private practice for a while, tried a lot of first-degree murder cases as a defense lawyer. I think it was 42 where they demanded the death penalty, and that backed up by a bunch where they didn't. Got the youngest person in the world off death row at one point. Then I got elected 30 plus years ago to a criminal court position.
Wow.
After a number of things, I got discovered. They were trying to intimidate Judge Judy and threatened her to replace her with me, which was just a dodge. And anyway, I did 15 years with that show, and I wound up the last few years as being the number one and number two syndicated show in the country. It was Judy and I battling out for one, and we were both kicking Oprah's ass and Dr. Phil. And
Yeah.
sometimes Wheel of Fortune got in there, and then I was beating Judy until CBS, which had both of us, decided that they wanted to exercise this option for her, but not me. Where if anybody in the household recorded the show and anybody else watched it within 2 days, you get double the rating. They refused to exercise that option with me, and my agent and I were going around with them about it because it would have made more money. But anyway, it is what it is. So I used it as a pulpit to spread the word, because I never was into just being about making money. It was because I had a cause that I did most things, and that was to exercise effective leadership for your people and do what you could do to make their circumstances better. And I wish more people did that these days, but you know, it is what it is. So here I am.
Indeed.
Oh,
Indeed.
one other thing.
Yes.
They have talked me into running for mayor of Memphis in 2023. So the slogan is JJB for mayor of Memphis, Tennessee in 2023.
Wow.
So send Brown Town if you want to bring the town back around.
I like that. I like that mantra very much. That's very good. Yeah, you know,
Okay.
I remember very fondly when I was younger, 14, 15, mother and I, when I was off school some days, would watch daytime television. And a lot of the judges, we'd watch Judge Toller, Judge Alex, and you would also come on as well. And I think what really distinguished you from a lot of the other judges is that, and maybe you and Judge Mathis had this in common, but I think you had a more of it. You were really stern and blunt, but you were blunt with the aim of getting people to actually reckon with themselves, getting people to actually realize what their problems what were. Would you say that's a fair characterization?
Yes, it is. The other thing too is Judge Toller had been a real circuit court judge. So was Judge Alex. So was uh, Judge Mathis.
Mm-hmm.
Judge Ephraim had never been a judge, and quite a few of the ones they have on now never have been judges.
Mm-hmm.
Judy had never been a trial judge. She was over a special restricted domestic court. She got appointed to that right out of law school by Mayor Koch, who wound up being the judge on People's Court for a while until he had heart problems. And she never tried a case that involved anything other than domestic stuff, and lawyers weren't permitted to practice in front of her. And I was the only one basically that had been out of law school practicing law and sitting on a bench for 10 years or more at the time. So that's may have something to do with why what I did looked like what it did.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
amazing what happens when you have to convince 12 tried and true folk of the merits of your case or keep the state from proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt to the satisfaction of the unanimous jury. It gave you a perspective. I mean, you came out of that law thing, well, the unpermitted touching of the defendant upon the person of the alleged victim. No, what happened, man? Willie went upside Earl's head, man, and who weed on to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
you have to break it down for the juries. A lot of lawyers can't.
Yeah, and this kind of gets into a broader, I think, broader issue. I think on the topic of politics, which is very closely related to the topic of law. In fact, I think they're intertwined. I think that a lot of politicians these days, I think the inverse is true. A lot of them speak in a way that a lot of people believe that most folks understand, but they do so in a manner to obfuscate, to evade, and to conceal what they are truly trying to do. And I think this is especially true of the corporate media. For example, yes, you have a response?
Oh, I'm just listening to you.
Yeah. And I think it's especially true of the corporate media. Because and I was researching the downfall of CNN quite recently, because they're having to shift up their business operations, and they're having to reframe their model given their ratings and everything. And I was just thinking, a lot of people in society are being met where they are, so to speak, but they're not being met where they are in a way that is helping them. Right? It's one thing to meet someone where they are, but you have to do so in a way that actually helps them get closer to a positive outcome. And I think that a lot of very important people in society just don't do that. They take one aspect of that equation, but take it in the entirely other different direction. And I find that.
Let me say this.
Yes,
Let me say this. There is an old axiom about America, about its system. The people get the representation they deserve. And the representation is pretty poor because the people are not doing their job now. They have been acclimated to a deficiency over the last half century that I've been adult, and it's not a pretty thing. That said, we have too many politicians that are hacks, and too many of them have a limited perspective on what they can do, what they're doing. For example, not taking sides on this, but when they tried to impeach Trump the first go around, one of the two articles of impeachment they sent over to the Senate was obstructing Congress. And what was obvious from reading what they sent over was that they considered the House of Representatives to be Congress because they were known as congressmen. That came from 120, 130 years ago, when only members of the House of Representatives were elected, in the newspaper papers called them congressmen, at which time to elect another congressman. But Article 1 of the Constitution said the Congress of the United States shall consist of two chambers: the House of Representatives, that's one, and two, the Senate. So as soon as they sent that article over to the Senate said, hey, can anybody feel obstructed? No. Well, since that doesn't embrace everybody, that's out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, to show you the ignorance of the body that sent it over, it did not state anything that was impeachable. You can impeach for three reasons under the U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 4. 1, bribery; 2, treason; or 3, a crime in office, either a felony or a misdemeanor. Obstructing Congress is not a crime. It's not designated as such anywhere in any American law. And then the other offense was abusing authority. Again, that's not stated as a crime. So you get this where people who are supposed to make the laws are unaware of the Constitution or the larger framework in which the law is found. And that's not surprising. The last several decades have shown, in the polls taken by the bar associations, either NBA, the Black Bar Association, American Bar Association, ABA, which is national, or Trial Lawyers Association, is that less than 25% of all practicing lawyers and sitting judges have actually read the Constitution. They've studied aspects of it in law school, but these days it tends to be a commercial aspect of the Constitution rather than as it applies to people. So that's even less. You've got maybe 8-9% of the people that have sat in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate who've ever read the Constitution that they're supposed to be legislating to effectuate. So it's kind of pathetic. A lot of them, I'd say 80, 85, 90% of them never read the bills that they vote for. There was one debacle in there about that bailout bill under the Obama administration, the $781 billion bailout, basically of Goldman Sachs for ineptitude, where they wrote a long, nasty letter to the Justice Department demanding prosecution of the failed executives who used the bailout money to pay themselves lucrative golden parachutes and their bonuses, etc. And then they shut up and got real quiet real quick when they realized that was written into the bill that they had never read. So it's just typical. You've got some ignoramuses who aren't very sophisticated in worldly matters. They are very cunning when it comes to their particular brand of politics. And there is this thing on the national level where, whatever your position on it, there is an attempt being made to impose a national religion. It's a secular one, but they're attempting to do it. And it's unusual in that it has to do with sexual orientation, which is an unusual thing to be basing law upon. I mean, I've never seen it in my life, but it is what it is. And when we talked about free sex back in the 60s and sexual activity and sexual equality, we looked at it as something under the First Amendment. So, I mean, it's a different kind of thing.
There's a lot of different.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole different orientation these days. And, from personally, somebody's gay, that's their business to do whatever in the devil they want to do. Get your freak on in your bedroom. But a lot of folk want to say, stay the hell out of my living room and don't try to recruit my kids and grandkids. But they're trying to make it an official state religion wherein if like you go abroad and you just happen to visit a U.S. embassy or a consulate, they've got the American flag and a rainbow flag. Now they can't put a flag under there with a cross on it or a crescent and a star or a six-pointed Jewish star or a Buddha on there or the six-armed deity for being a Hindu, but you got the rainbow flag and you have government employees in DC painting the sidewalks, crosswalks in the streets with that. So, I mean, for what it's worth.
I think there's a lot. There's a lot going on there. And I'm not sure where to start, but I guess I'll start here. You mentioned that a lot of people who happen to be involved in government have never read the Constitution, government or law. And I find that a very dangerous prospect for the kind of society that our founders wanted, because America was founded on philosophical principles. We were founded on axioms, on first principles, starting from the very structure of nature itself, going all the way down to the singular unit of nature, the individual, and then working our way from that premise to society. Man has natural rights, he has free will, he has all of these things, and these things put moral demands on the structure of government to regulate how it's supposed to act and behave towards man and society. And in a world that forgets that very basic principle, how can it uphold the structure that requires that principle? And someone told me a long time ago that the more you read older cases, like the further older cases that you read, you'll see more references to principles and concepts and philosophical ideas as opposed to common law. But there was a point in American history.
Right. Well, see, common law. Let me say this: first case U.S. Supreme Court ever decided in 1792, I believe. Number one, concerned itself with what is the common law, because that's in the Sixth Amendment. Any matter tried upon the common law shall be heard upon the common law on appeal, etc., etc. Well, what is the common law? They cited an 1661 British case from the English House of Lords, and it's this quote: "All law in America is common law until superseded by statutory law, regulation, or ordinance." What is the common law? The common law is, again, quote, "that body of judge-made law based on tradition, precedent, and the evolving conditions of society," unquote. That's the holding. So you hear from the far right this thing, the anathema of judge-made law. They need to return to the original intent of the Constitution. And the people that sat on that Supreme Court that ruled on the very first case in American history that went to the Supreme Court, where every one of them was involved in the revolution, the drafting, etc., of the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence or whatever it may have been, they said all law in America is judge-made until superseded by statutory law. So it also had in there, in that very first case, evolving conditions of society. So the Constitution was never anticipated to be stagnant. It was supposed to evolve. But what you have now is, frankly, too many judges on the appellate level in federal court, let alone in the state court levels, who have never been experienced in the practice of law. There's one woman still, let's say, I can think of this one, on the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. She's an appellate justice for the United States. But when she went to law school, she had been married and sent her husband to law school, had 3 children by him. When she came out, she graduated from law school, took the bar, passed it, was sworn in as a lawyer, and 4 days after she was sworn in, she was made a circuit court judge in Tennessee with unlimited trial jurisdiction. She didn't even know how many challenges a side could take in a jury trial. She had no idea what the law was about, and the worst rookie in the whole courtroom was the judge. In fact, she had first stepped foot in a courtroom the day she got sworn in as a judge. And to compound it, she wasn't even 2 years out of law school when she got nominated and approved as a federal district court judge. So, I mean, you would expect the federal judge to be a heavyweight in the law. But yeah, it's somebody isn't even 2 years out of law school and has never tried a case as a lawyer. So that's the federal judge. What kind of mess is that? Now she's on the Court of Appeals.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, her husband got appointed as a district attorney, and he had never practiced criminal law. In fact, he was 2-some hours late for swearing in because he didn't know where the criminal courthouse was because he had never been. They had to go get him and bring him.
Wow. Yeah.
See, there's too much of that in the law right now. And on the federal appellate level and on the U.S. Supreme Court, too many of the judges have never practiced any people law or been involved in those things where they're real people they deal with. They are law professors. They dealt with mega corporate interests where they were in a large law firm and they had no trial work and they had no appellate work, and they just quickly became a lower level judge and moved up from there. And they don't understand the realities of the things that impact ordinary people, and they are unfamiliar with things like why this might be important in criminal law, or even things like so-called criminal rights are not really criminal rights. They are protections for ordinary citizens so that the government power is not used for political oppression. Now, I think a lot might be done if the newspapers and the news media would apprise people of what the law is about, say with this, the Trump FBI goings on.
Yeah.
And there is a federal case, Supreme Court case, that lays it out very succinctly. It's from 1988. It's known as Department of the Navy versus Egan, EGAN. Look it up and see what it says about the whole thing. And you say, wait a minute, what are they doing? Now, I don't care one way or the other about boss Trump, but I practiced criminal law. I was a prosecutor. I was a criminal court judge. And I know that the rights that we enjoy sometimes get established even when the guy is not a good guy that's claiming the rights. You can see a lot of that. In fact, that's usually the case. The justification on the bottom end was, this is a bad guy, so let's jack him up. Well, no, you set the precedent. Common law in America, based on tradition, precedent, et cetera, et cetera. So when you set a negative precedent, you're doing something wrong for everybody. So just take a look at that. You can Google the case, Department of the Navy versus Egan. EGANS, United States Supreme Court, 1988. Very enlightening case. Essentially, what it says is under Article 1, Article 2, and some other things, Article 1, Section 8, amongst other things, where the president is designated as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Services, just like with clemency. There is no oversight of the president's clemency authority. He's not subject to any regulation by Congress or law because it's constitutional. The U.S. Supreme Court said in Egan that the president is not subject to any law passed by Congress because his authority is commander-in-chief and under the as chief diplomatic officer of the United States, comes directly and is specifically stated and granted to him by the Constitution of the country. Therefore, Congress can't engage in oversight of the president any more than they can engage in the oversight of the president when it comes to clemency. And there are good reasons for that. So the case basically says the president can declassify anything etc., quote, in any manner he chooses, unquote. It even says if the Joint Chiefs of Staff declared this to be top secret, the president can declassify it. And it does not have to be while he's in office. It's because everything that is subject to classification has been sent to him for his reading, his perusal, his absorption, and for his briefing and for his approval. So it's in his head. So unless you want to say, wow, we whoopee, he's going to go talk to a federal agent, I mean, some foreign agent, there's not a damn thing you can do about that anyway, except if he does so, try him for treason if you've got what the Constitution says is necessary.
Right.
And by the way, treason is the only crime defined in the Constitution, and it is very specific about how many witnesses you need, what they have to see, and what the evidence has got to be. So it's unusual in that that is the sole crime defined in the Constitution. So basically they're saying, and as chief diplomatic officer, it may come down to when negotiating with a foreign power through its ambassadors or directly with the head of state for that foreign policy power, the president, it may decide that, okay, fine, let me tell you something that's not out there that may influence what you decide to do. And he has the absolute discretion to do that. That's never been disputed, but apparently these folk don't get it. And I suspect what's going on is they want to stave off what looks to be a midterm disaster. But we need to be aware of those kind of things because we've seen those techniques, whether you like Trump or not.
Right. It seems like a soft coup to me. It's a soft coup by the administrative state.
Where we've seen these is in the activities of the National Socialist Workers Party. Now, what is the National Socialist Workers Party? Well, the acronym is Nazi.
Yeah.
That's what the acronym was in Deutsch, über Deutschland, yeah? The Nazis. And you look at what they did in the late 1920s and early 30s, and you see a duplicate. It's almost the same word for word if you change some of the names.
Interesting.
So we need to be aware of that kind of thing. And I had a Russian professor, a woman, back in the 60s that I was teaching assistant for at UCLA in political science. The course was the Soviet sphere of influence and world politics. And she was a real badass. She had been the highest ranking woman on the Soviet Politburo. She had been deputy chief commissar at the Stalingrad siege. She used to drink that vodka and talk about putting a pistol to the back of a comrade's head to give him courage and maybe blowing a few of them away, laugh, as an example. Now, she was deputy chief commissar under Khrushchev, who, interestingly enough, in today's world, was a native from Ukraine and grew up there. But it is what it is. And she also had been basically head of propaganda for the NKVD, which was a predecessor to the KGB you hear about with James Bond stuff in the CIA, etc. And she said, America is in grave danger of becoming fascist, not from some jackboot wearing, goose stepping, uniformed political thugs, she said, she speak great English, but from, as she put it, quote, some pink panty wearing long haired hippies who would impose the methodology of fascism in the name of making things better for you and not realizing what they did. And a lot of what I'm seeing right now is scary because never in my life has anyone started talking about the First Amendment and its exercise has got to do with a damn thing about somebody's feelings getting hurt. Hate speech. That is so dangerous, because every
Agreed.
time we have had a slip in our country's history and gone slightly there, it winds up backfiring within a decade or so, and it comes back to bite even the people that it was intended to protect.
Yeah.
And under American law, you can't say something under the First Amendment that's knowingly false. Say you like yelling fire in a crowded theater when there's likely to be a great public disturbance immediately. You can't say that with protection under the First Amendment. If it comes to, well, you can say it, but you bear the consequences if you are uttering fighting words to someone. In other words, saying to somebody what would make an ordinary, reasonable person so
Disturbed,
out of
stirred
it
up.
that they would engage in an immediate physical combat.
Yeah.
And other than that, if you hurt somebody's feelings, if you're telling the truth, you don't have an action. Defamation of character, truth is an absolute defense. You have to say something that would qualify as a civil wrong and get damages.
Yeah.
But never making speech criminal. No, and not in wartime, even when you get sedition or something like that, maybe entering the picture. So this is something totally new. I've never read about anything like this in the 50 plus years I've been dealing with law. Never.
Yeah.
So this is scary. The other thing is, they don't like the Fourth Amendment. And by they, I mean a lot of people that are in the current majority of the House of Representatives. They don't like it because that is a restriction on search and seizure, and they don't want stuff to be sacrosanct. And they want to do what they did with Trump, where without going through the process, they can go seize records. Now, one of the things that's come out with what's going on with Mel-Argo is a lot of those documents concern criminal wrongdoing by the FBI and engaging in domestic spying like they do every now and then and have to get reined in. That's against the law. You need probable cause to get a warrant to snoop on somebody, but they're just doing it anyway. So that's what a large number of those documents purport to be. And I'll give an example as to how it carries over on us. How many people listening in have had a friendly game of poker or tonk for money around the house? Or Super Bowl, had a Super Bowl party and everybody's betting on the outcome by quarter and halftime, what the score is going to be, what the spread's going to be. Well, guess what? In every state in the United States, that's illegal. That's criminal. But you can get away with it because some rookie cops can't drive down the street and say, look at all these guys over there. They're probably at a Super Bowl party, and I bet they're betting on the outcome of the game. Let's go crash in there and see what's going on. You can't do that. And you see, when you violate it because you think the guy is a super bad guy, that sets a precedent under that first case heard by the U.S. Supreme Court. And you can keep doing it. See, it's bad.
Right. And
Second Amendment.
It treats.
I find it interesting that the federal government is attempting to integrate a buyback program that they're funding or financing with the states to buy back guns that they're sending to where? Ukraine. See, one of the purposes of the Second Amendment that nobody talks about today is this thing in the U.S. Constitution of checks and balances. So you have the executive, you have the legislative, you have the judicial, you've got the federal, you've got the state, and as a final offset on all of the above, you have the people. So part of this whole thing is there's a check and balance. It's really got to be deep for the people to get into doing their thing. But then again, ordinary law and order will deal with that. Then again, you have the states offset the federals, and then you have the thing of the federal power if they decide to withdraw, like the Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
and deal with insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
Then the feds get involved in the whole thing, and then you have the courts that can oversee and declare
Right.
unconstitutional legislation passed by the legislative body. The
Mm-hmm.
legislative body deals with appropriation and enablement acts, in other words, to make things the law and to
Mm-hmm.
pay for it. And the chief executive is responsible for carrying it out. And
Mm-hmm.
everybody is subject to everybody else. But you
Mm-hmm.
see, when you get into this attitude of, I am entitled to be safe, I don't like the idea that there's any danger. I should be in this absolute force field of safety. Well, guess what? You live on the planet Earth. You can get wiped out by hurricane, tsunami, tornado, typhoon, lightning can strike you. You can get frozen. If
Mm-hmm.
there is a cold snap, you can die of heat stroke. If you got a heat wave, you can deal with the effects of drought, starvation. You can
Right.
get eaten up by a shark. You can be out having a flat tire, driving across country, and a grizzly, if you're up there in Wyoming, can snatch you and have a snack. All kinds of things can happen. You can be surfing, and a great white smiley, we call him, those of us who scuba dive, he can have a nice snack and you're gone. You can get hit by a meteorite, asteroid, Betelgeuse, the
Right.
supermassive red star 500 light years away, which is about to go nova, can go nova, and everybody gets wiped out. And you get no advance warning. All kinds of stuff can happen.
Right.
See, so it's not safe being alive on the planet Earth. Hell, first time I got elected to judge, it was July. The election was going to be 2 weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at this picnic campaigning, and I'd gone around shaking everybody's hand. It was broad daylight, not a cloud in the damn sky. And I said, okay, man, I'm tired. And I leaned up against a tree, and I put my hands back, pushed off, took one step, and the damn thing, he got hit by lightning. Bam, flames, splinters everywhere. I didn't get touched by anything, but I could have gotten fried right there. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not
No.
safe.
Reality is dangerous. Life is dangerous.
Yeah.
It throws all kinds of things in our way. And this mentality that you can avoid it is a result of fantasy. And that result of
Yeah.
fantasy is a result of comfort. And that result of comfort is a result of society. We have a very comfortable society right now. And I think that that's, Judge, I don't mention this often, but I'm 22. So I'm young, and I grew up in an age right now where we're the most comfortable that we've been in a very long time. The processing power we have in our phones, that we have in our computers, the ability to communicate with people, the ability to be social without actually physically seeing someone. And when you grow up, I'm sure there were challenges that required you to interface with them more in a more intimate way than
We
we
didn't
have.
have these
Right.
at
Right.
all,
Right.
you know, and
And that's
you were
weakened
lucky
us, I
if you
think.
could find a handy phone booth to drop a dime in there. That's what
Yeah.
drop a dime on some, that's where that came from. And,
Yeah.
we didn't have this thing when I was growing up. It didn't make any difference what your race was, white, black, brown, red, yellow.
Yeah.
In the summertime, the kids, we'd leave in the morning. We're in
Yeah.
elementary school. Everybody knew to be back when the street lights came on, which is about
Mm-hmm.
8:30.
Mm-hmm.
So between 8 and 9 in the morning, where are you going? I'm going with Alan and James and Lodrick. We're gonna hang out. Richard, I
Yeah.
think we're going to the park.
Yeah.
Or you might decide to go swimming. And when nobody was hovering around the pool to see if you drowned, you went. And we became independent. We understood that there were consequences to doing the wrong kind of things. You might get in trouble. Somebody might beat you behind. You know, you had to get yourself out of the mess and you had to develop discretion. So by the time you got grown, you were used to dealing with your own affairs. Now a kid can't even go out in the backyard at 8 or 9 years old without mama hovering to see that somebody doesn't snatch. So you miss
Concerning.
these things.
Yeah.
We cooked for ourselves, you know, and we didn't have to get, you know, somebody standing over your shoulder looking, because it was assumed that as a 8 or 9, 10-year-old, you were a bona fide OLSD. What's that? OLSD stands for organic labor saving device. You were a well-trained child who could cut the yard with a power mower or push the one. You could water the lawn. You could take the trash out, take the garbage out, wash the dishes, do the laundry, fold the clothes, go take laundry, hang them up on the clothesline if your mama told you to do that, make up the beds, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
See,
Interesting.
that doesn't happen now.
Now there's an interesting thing. Maturity back then was assigned to younger age groups, because a lot of times back then, you would have grown men in certain areas of the country marrying 15-year-old girls. Like Jerry Lee Lewis got in trouble for
Oh,
that.
look, let me say this. That was some sick shit.
Yeah.
Everybody in the country used to look
I
at that.
agree.
You know, goddamn hillbillies down there in the South. Or even in the South. Jesus Christ, goddamn, did he act at trailer park trash doing shit like that? Jesus Christ almighty.
It's a wonder
Hey,
that
man,
was.
it's that cool, man. You don't screw with the little girls, man. And even when we were coming up, when we were in high school, hey, man, be careful, man. 17 will get you 20, man. You better be careful, man. Don't be dealing with the wrong one.
Yeah.
We knew better than that. That was some sick stuff.
So that was
that
on the
was
fringes.
country.
Oh,
See,
okay.
and one thing that you have to deal with right now is 50 years ago, that was not America. It's like there were these backwoods people stuck off in some rural area down in the South. And it seems that in the intervening 50 years, they had a whole lot of babies and spread all over the country. So now even LA is like that. And it was not cool at all. Trust me.
Okay.
That was not what was going on. There was no issue. Man, what's wrong with you, man? Can't you deal with a grown woman? Man, what's the problem? Hey, man, you okay? You need therapy, dude?
Yeah.
What's the matter? Hey, man, dude over here's got a problem. Homeboy can't find a woman. He's trying to deal with these children. Man, we don't do that.
Right.
Man, look here, man. You better get out the habit, because if you mess around with my baby sister, something's gonna happen to you.
Okay. It's just I think Roy Moore, the Senate candidate, he got in trouble for some of the escapades he had in his younger days with allegedly.
Rudy Ray Moore. He lived across. He was a neighbor of one of my law partners at one time.
Oh wow, interesting. The Chief Justice of Alabama, who became a Senate candidate, that Roy Moore?
No, I was talking about somebody, Ray Moore. I was talking about I was talking about the other singer from Memphis.
Okay.
Who married his 14-year-old first cousin.
Oh, wow. That's something else.
Yeah.
That's something else.
The piano player.
Oh, okay. Well, I think you were right to notice that on the topic of sexuality and other things as well, whether it be race, whether it be socioeconomic status, all of that has definitely become like a shrine that people who want to do good pray to, and then they use that to dictate their policies, And I think a lot of it started in America in the 60s, in the late 60s, with the rise of the New Left, people like Allen Ginsberg, with the sexual liberation movement, with the women's rights movement. A lot of this stuff, and I'm not saying all of those movements were bad, a lot of them were conceived to fight back against legitimate things. In America, before Stonewall, and even way after Stonewall,
That's
gay
an
men
astute
were,
observation, young
yeah.
man. Let me give you a little clarity
Please.
on that.
Oh, please.
See, in the 60s, when the pill became available, women flocked to it. I mean, I was a assistant teacher in the Project Head Start program when the first one started up in 1965. It was in South Central, well, what became known as South Central LA. And every week, the mothers of these children in Head Start had to attend these birth control classes, and they gave in-care O's and foam and all kinds of other stuff and set them up with appointments for the pill. Every student at every college in Los Angeles availed themselves of the pill that was available through the schools to get them prescribed. We didn't have all of these outside pregnancies. I mean, they occurred, but I mean, now dude can't even put his head in there without some, the head of it in there without some woman getting knocked up. I mean, it did not happen.
Yeah.
And the other thing is once women got control of their reproductive processes, there was little that would keep them from getting involved in sex like guys could. So there was a true equality. And there was an assumption that if a woman is equal to a guy, then what applied to him applied to her on both sides. But now I've seen this morph under the influence of the feminist movement into a war on men where the females are trying to prove they are better than the males, which totally gets away from this thing of the cooperative aspect of what's going on in life. When you see a human, anybody, what are you looking at? A successful screw. So it's all about being hatched or born, maturing, courting, mating, having a successful screw, something else being hatched or born, maturing, etc., with being raised, and then generation after generation.
Interesting.
So that requires a bit of cooperation. It's not like bear, where the boar bear screw the sow bear and she goes off and has the cubs, and she keeps them away from the boar because the boar is going to kill the cubs off, so she'll come into heat so he can get him some bear nookie. I mean, it's not like that. The human child breeding and rearing scheme involves a nuclear family, and that's the way it's been. I mean, sometimes you got to do what you got to do because somebody may be a widow or a widower through an untimely death. There may be an absence on a hunting or expedition or a sea journey or a trading expedition, whatever the case may be, but that's how humans dealt with it. Now you've got people that find that's an anathema. And interestingly enough, we've got a problem because mothers, being human creatures, have an in with the children until they get about 7 going on 8 years old. Now, that being the case, what happens is that's being misused, and a lot of females who do not understand the relationship between men and women look at males as evil. Toxic masculinity. Actually, what they complain of is the absence of masculinity, not toxic masculinity, and it's a misnomer because masculinity is the primary acculturation and a socialization of the male human, so that the apex predator on the planet does not use those predatory trends on the people in his own group. And you have this thing that you can't get away from without intense personal shame and embarrassment if you don't do what a man's supposed to do, where you are about the business of making where you live a better, safer, more secure place filled with economic prosperity, sense of purpose, morality, ethics. And you are about the business of protecting womanhood, advancing manhood, and rearing childhood, where if the Titanic goes down, the men say, ma'am, you can take my seat, I'll drown. That's what I got to do. And that takes a whole lot. So when you start trying to destroy masculinity, that's one of the reasons you have so many freaks running around shooting up hallways and the hoods, because they don't have manhood. Most of these freaks that shoot up the schoolways and the malls, there's something wrong with them. They're unmanly. And one of the characteristics, they don't know how to handle bullies because they've been told it's all right not to learn how to deal with it one way or the other. The ones that shoot up the hoods, they're just as unmanly too, because your typical hood rat is nowhere near being a man. He is a threat to where he lives, not something that will see to its protection and advancement and enhancement. So that's not manly to do that. And that is where it all went down. And also this welfare thing. The Johnson administration really, I think they had good intentions. There was this problem, and people said, we've got all this prosperity. Look at all the people we're sending to school. And by the way, when I went to UCLA, there was no tuition. It was free.
Interesting.
You had to support yourself in the books. Cal State LA, which was part of the state college system, now the state university system, as distinguished from the University of California. There was no tuition.
This is before
the city colleges all over the state. There was no tuition. That was the same in Illinois, New York, you name it.
And this was
now it's ruinous. And by the way, this bailout thing, not bailout, but this student loan thing, that's a rip-off.
I agree. Totally.
First off, if you go through a 4-year college and you graduate anywhere in the world, you are at least middle class within 2 or 3 years after you get out. The cutoff is $125,000 a year. That's middle class. So in other words, if you're middle class, you don't get any benefit. But if you're under that, and a whole lot of us will get real upset with this, you ain't middle class. You're down in a lower class situation. You ain't where you're supposed to be. And these Pell Grants, most can't qualify because their parents made too much money just with a regular job.
That's what happened to me at first.
Yeah.
My mother worked 3 jobs.
What happens is Constitution says no one shall be deprived of life, liberty, nor property without due process of law. The 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment have made it so that corporations, which are fictional people, have the same rights as anybody else. So you can't deprive a corporation, aka bank, of its claim to monies due and owed without due process. So what happens is the bank gets paid, they get their interest paid by the federal government. They don't have to have all of the collection bureaus, the law firms they bring in to do the legal work and all of the stuff to get the loans paid back. Hell, they make money off of it. Meanwhile, if you get your student loans paid off, what about your employment? Are you making over $125,000 a year now after this? No, you're still where you were before. What do they start school teachers with? They start school teachers in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee at $28,000 to $32,000 a year. Jeez. They are way down into lower class.
Yeah.
So
that's
what's going on here? And no retirement either. And that depends on whether they have a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree. So, I mean, something's wrong with this picture. Yeah. And one of the reasons we have such a hellacious situation with the penitentiary and the penal system, so-called criminal justice, is this is the only industrialized country in the world where there is no government program to deal with the creeping and advancing obsolescence of the working class person in the face of industrial technology and computerization. We say leave it to private enterprise, but private enterprise is about the business of making money. It's not about the business of charitably retraining workers. So what happens is you have a lot of workers who become surplus to the labor requirements of the system. So what do you do with them? Well, think of labor as a commodity like wheat, corn, or cotton. When you have a glut and the price drops, which is why we're worrying about minimum wage instead of not worrying about it, because everybody's making a decent living depending upon where they are. Well, we have the same situation as you do when you have an agricultural commodity. When you have too many soybeans for the market, you do three things: store the surplus, subsidize the would-be producer, and cut back production. For people, instead of putting the surplus in a grain silo, you put it in a people warehouse, a penitentiary, or a jail. Instead of subsidizing the farmer by paying him to let his land grow fallow or grow something else, you issue the welfare check or the public assistance or the Section 8, not as a stopgap emergency thing, but as a permanent something looked at as an entitlement. You cut back production of soy by not growing the stuff. What do? We cut back production of labor units. Hip hop, gangster rap stuff they look at in mass media, the glorification of dysfunction. They bang out, drug out, drop out, get knocked up too early, too often, develop inappropriate attitudes, outlooks, way of carrying self. They don't have any vocational skills, no academic foundations. They're unemployable. They clown because that's been glorified. They make their communities chaotic so that community cannot engage in political self-help on a collective basis. They tend to get exploited rather than to being able to use the political system for their own good.
Now, Judge, there is a counter.
And then this is the other thing. Once those convictions start coming in, that person becomes more and more unlikely to be employed, so they put him in a warehouse. A lot of people say, man, we need to get rid of the 13th Amendment, man, because they let folk, they still allow slavery. Well, most of them didn't know it until I started tweeting it about 5 or 6 years ago. But yeah, that's true. Slavery has never been made illegal as a punishment for criminal offense. And that's the whole idea about locking somebody up. They become effectively a slave because their liberty has been taken away from them. So if you don't get punished by that, you're not thinking like a free man. But anyway, back to this. Yeah, they get them punching out license plates and doing menial labor in prison, but that's just to keep them in line, because what is it? Idle minds mischief make. Get them something to do. That's even in the military. They got all kinds of make work stuff in the military so the troops don't get restless and start getting out of hand. So that's what they're doing in the penitentiary. They really don't want your effective labor, because that's why they have what they have with the penal system, because labor is surplus these days. And the other thing is they don't want you being Timothy McVeigh and making an IKD, an improvised killing device known as an IED, with $250 of fertilizer and blowing up a courthouse in Oklahoma City and taking down 240 some people. See, that's what they don't want for real. So we get caught up, yo, man, I got my game, man. No, you getting suckered. You've been hustled, fool. They need you. If you didn't engage in this criminal activity, you jackass, things wouldn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, and how many people running for head librarian for the county go, I want to be tough on crime. So when somebody's tough on crime, they don't pay attention to the economic circumstances, and now it's flipped over to the other way, where the press says everybody's against the police, defund the police. But now, Damn.
Huh. Oh,
Yeah, sorry about that.
no problem. It's fine. You're fine.
Somebody
Fine.
tried to call.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I am out into politics. For everyone, somebody that you hear talking about, man, the police, man, they wrong, man, blah, blah, blah. We got to do, yeah, you need to do something about it. But here's the thing. For everyone, you got 20, 25 people that live in the hood. Man, I wish them police would shoot more of them fools, man. I'm tired of getting broke in, man. I've been burglarized 5 times in the
Exactly.
last year and a half, man.
Mm-hmm.
I ain't working to get my, man, they done wrecked my car again, man. Somebody took
Mm-hmm.
my rims, man. Or man, somebody shot my baby sister, man. Man, somebody shot my mom. Somebody shot my grandmama. Man, my homeboy was getting off work, man. Somebody shot and killed him on a humbug, man. Hey, see, people are tired of all this crap, but the mainstream media, it's in their interest to push this
Yes.
dysfunction.
Yes. So, Judge, a few things. I think that if we lived in a culture, this is somewhat a counterpoint to the technological thing you were mentioning, the automation leaving behind middle class people. That's true in many cases, but I think that if we lived in a culture that prided itself on advancement and the cultivation of skill and excellence, automation wouldn't be a very big cost to people. Now,
No, it's
yeah,
not. That's not where I was even going with
oh,
this,
okay,
but that's very true.
okay,
Work ethic and pride of
yeah,
accomplishment. But what I'm talking about is like in Japan, when they come up with a new machine in the automotive industry that displaces workers, what they do is retrain the workers to deal with
of the machine,
advancing the state of the
yeah,
machines and quality control. They get paid
interesting,
more, the product sells better. You see,
yeah,
you can retrain for stuff.
and we
You
don't do
can
that,
put people back
right?
in. And see, take your typical Japanese automotive worker. He's been there 5 years. He's guaranteed 30 days of company paid vacation. He's guaranteed free medical care for life. His
Mm.
children are guaranteed money to get as far as they can in college as they want to go. So what do we get here? You know,
Well, we don't have a socialized system, though. And I
well,
think that's,
yeah.
and it's one of the, and over there in the East, where there's more cultural cohesion and there's more of a communitarian collective emphasis. I think that, and there's more homogeneity as well over in Japan because they don't open their borders and their
Oh,
population
yeah, right.
is dying for it. I think in
Right.
those
But remember,
circumstances,
right here
yeah.
in the United States, all up until the end of the 60s, college education at a public institution was essentially free. Now,
Mm.
where that started, St. Ron the Reagan. He campaigned starting
Interesting.
in 1967 on a platform of ending free higher education in California, on getting rid of mental institutions,
Mm.
on turning these freeloaders out in the streets where they belong.
Mm.
So
Right.
he quickly ramped up nothing at all in 18, 20 months and see, this was ruinous back. This is
Yeah.
50 some years ago, 460 some dollars a quarter. Then it went up to 800. And to give you a
Interesting.
perspective, 1970, I bought a brand new Datsun 2000 drop top sports car with a 2-liter engine in it. It was the hot thing to race in a certain racing class against certain kinds of Porsches,
Interesting.
with tax license, AM, FM, which was the hot setup then, and mag wheels. That thing, what was it? $1,980.
What?
So you see, when you're talking about $800 a quarter, you're talking about
Wow.
half the price of a car, a sports car. Now, that Datsun 2000, they superseded it with a Datsun 240Z, and that is your current Nissan 380X, sports car, which how much does it cost now? See, so they just jacked everything up. He got in as governor and he started closing down all of the mental institutions, and they started calling him Teflon Ron because everything ran off of him. What ran off of him? Well, when he was the governor, he was part of the Board of Regents, and he and 10 other members of the Board of Regents were found to have a scam where they were spending the money not on education, but on building physical structures, physical plant for the colleges and universities that they were pocketing the money off of. So, wow. Then when his administration came in 1980, you didn't see homeless, but year after he got in office, you started seeing all these people out in the streets with no job. I was making good money in 1979 under Carter. 1980 continued. 1981, hell, I'd been bringing in, I think it was 80, 90,000 after taxes back then. And that would be somewhere around 350K right now after taxes, 500K. Reagan got in. Hell, I didn't even clear 25 gross a year and a half after them. I was in a hard place, and all my clients were out of work, staying in brothers' back guest house or fixed up garage, brother-in-law's garage. See, everything went to hell. People were out on the streets sleeping on vents so they didn't freeze, and they didn't care. They laughed about it. They took this thing where, I remember this. He got up on a speech he made. People are saying that the children need a better balanced meal under these feeding programs that we have at the schools, but they get ketchup, don't they? Isn't that a vegetable? Like, wow. And what's wrong with a Twinkie? I always thought Twinkies were just delicious. So they were feeding these kids Twinkies and little packets, you peel them, wafers, and they spread ketchup on the stuff. I mean, wow. And by then, see, he got into this myth of the welfare queen. Now, there were some, I represented some, but the point is that became the boogeyman. And what was happening is in 1967, 68, you had all these working class Black families whose kids were going to college and getting out of that and leaving the hood, and they were staying in college so they didn't stay in the nom or come back in a body bag. And people were moving up. 1981, something had changed. They had this thing that went into place where the more babies you had, the bigger your check was, and you couldn't have a daddy around because they'd cut the check off. When I started practicing law more than 50 years ago, what happened is number one case was getting the check cut back on because welfare worker cut it off because woman had 6 or 7 baby daddies and 11 kids, and 1 or 2 of the daddies were trying to come over and be fathers. And then you had the juvenile courts. That's not my kid. Doesn't even look anything like me. Boy, you pay child support, he looked just like you after a little while. And in the South, it was really ridiculous. In Memphis, we had a fool that was a juvenile court judge. He dropped out of the 6th grade. So the highest grade he had finished was the 5th grade. That's the judge. Yeah. He was in there from 1963 to 2006. 40 years ago, they declared that due to his educational lack, he couldn't understand arguments of an attorney. So for him to preside over a case would deprive a defendant of the right to be represented by an attorney. So he couldn't hear anything. But he's still in there at that time, and he was holding forth like a spider. And when I first appeared in that court, about 50 years ago, it had only been integrated for 14 months, desegregated for 14 months. I had 5 clients in there. I was with legal services. So I'm sitting there, and he's calling everybody the N-word, and Blackie and Darkie and all this mess. I'm going, what in the hell is this? I'd come in from Los Angeles. I wasn't used to that. So I
Yeah.
zoned out, and this guy was shaking me, supposedly a bailiff. Boy, you hear the judge talking. I said, "Who the hell you calling boy?" And then the judge called me the N-word. "Don't you hear me talking to you, N?" I said, "Who you calling?" I said,
What?
"I ain't on your goddamn docket, you redneck cracker." I
Oh,
said, "Off
Judge.
the MF." I said, "I'm a lawyer down here." And I had a tape recorder going. I said, "I got you on tape. If you pull a gun out, I'm sticking it up your mama's ass." He had these rent-a-cops acting as baby. So we went round and round. "What you mean you represent?" I said, "I'm a lawyer. I'm not on your calendar. You got $10 jurisdiction over me for contempt." So now I'm reporting it. So and he
Oh
backed
man.
down. I
Oh
mean,
man.
that's
Oh
the way they
man.
rolled it.
Yeah.
"Judge, this ain't none of my kid. She be messing with this white man. Look how black I am. Look how pale that kid is." And he said, "Negra." By then, I jumped him so many times on habeas corpus, they'd start using the N word. It was "Negra, Negra. You feed that boy, he black up just as black as you are in a few weeks."
Wow.
So these guys, and see, later in the 80s, when they got DNA finally, I remember this cop I was representing. He'd been paying child support on his kid for 14 years. So she filed for an increase, or rather, the department did, DHS, Department of Human Services. And by the way, that juvenile court was representing DHS, and the judge had a contract to represent them, and he's supposed to be the independent judge. Wow,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Anyway, we go down there, and this magistrate's there who's just a lawyer. Guy had never practiced law, just out of law school, but he got the magistrate. And what happens is when they call the kid's name, I stand up, my client stands up, a second lawyer stands up with a second guy, and a third lawyer stands up with a third guy. All three of these guys have been paying child support on this same woman for this same child for 14 years.
Wow.
So they denied us getting a test. So we wound up sneaking the test. We went over there. All of us collaborated. When the grandmother had the child for one weekend, somebody spied out, had a detective they hired to go do that. So when everybody got tested, guess what? None of them were the dad. So this juvenile court refused to release any of the three from paying child support. We had to go up to the Court of Appeals to get that set aside. All right. That's how they roll. So none of these guys are particularly hot on being a daddy, because they said, "I ain't the dad," or, "I got pushed out of this." So 1976, when I was running the public defender's office, I had a lot of white employees who were scared to death to go down in the hood and talk to black defendants and black witnesses. So I'd go. So I walk into projects to interview my client, who's 19 years old. It's in a kitchen. It's filled with smoke. I tell them they have to put the joint down, because I didn't want to go off in court and test positive on a drug screen, which they'd pop on people then.
Wow.
And I'm looking at my client's 19, got 4 kids. And there's this 13-year-old girl in there, I think maybe is the aunt, but hell, the 13-year-old girl's got one of these kids, and another 13-year-old's got 2. So I'm looking at 9, 10, 11 kids running around. They stink like hell because they haven't had a bath in weeks.
We're still here.
They haven't had a bath in 2 weeks. They've got dried food all over their clothes. The butts haven't been washed. They got snot dried all over their faces. And
Jesus.
the woman smoking, and she going, "Little Ian, little black ass Ian, go get my cigarette food."
Wow.
"Little Ian, go get me a beer out the fridge." Little useless pickaninny, blah, blah. Why you talk to your children like that? "He ain't worth a damn, just like that no good dog ass daddy of his." Just don't talk to your kids like that. And see, that's 1976, 77. So he's 7 years old, 8 years old. Let's go fast forward to 1987. He's 18 now. Let's go to 1997. He's 28 now. Let's go to 2007. He's 38 now. You see, so by now, his sister started having babies at 11 years old. So she's got babies.
Wait,
so
wait, 11. 11?
Yeah, 11
What?
years old. So what has happened is, let's fast forward to 2000. You have a woman who is 57 years old, 54 years old, 61 years old, and she's got daughters, granddaughters, great-granddaughters, great-great-granddaughters, great-great-great-granddaughters, great-great-great-great-great-granddaughters. She's got 6 generations. I had one family in my courtroom, a woman. I got her in 1994. She was born in 1937. She was 57 years old. Her 43-year-old daughter, who was not her oldest child that she had at 14, was in there on the same felony and drug cases as her mom. The 43-year-old had a 34-year-old in there who was born 1 week before her 10th birthday. She also had a 32-year-old son in front of me, and he was born when she was 11, and she had a 31-year-old daughter born when she was 12. The 34-year-old daughter of the 43-year-old, the 34-year-old daughter, the 43-year-old daughter of the 57-year-old, that 34-year-old had a 21-year-old daughter in front of me on felony drug and theft charges. And the 21-year-old daughter had an 11-year-old girl who was pregnant with her second child. Now, just think about that. One child, 11 years old, 21 years old, 34 years old, 43 years old, 57 years old. That's 6 generations. And I've got charge all of them. By the time we got 14 months later, it's 1996. I got the 57-year-old back in front of me. She's now 59. And I got the 21-year-old back in front of me. She's now 23. Her 11-year-old was now 13 with 3 children.
It's a cycle.
Yeah.
Cycle.
And then the other thing is, I just detest pedophiles who mess around with girls. So I remember this was like 1991. I had this fool in front of me. I was unloading on him to sentence him. So how in the world can you manage you're 28 years old. What do you mean having sex with a 12, then 13-year-old and getting her pregnant? Blah, blah, blah. And he didn't understand. And he started crying. I don't understand what I did wrong. My mama wasn't but 14 when she had me. And she wasn't but 12 when she had my big brother. What did I do wrong? So I get the girl's mama in there. And she wants to testify to the defendant. He's talking about, what did he do wrong? Yeah, I brought him up in the house. I knew he was 27, 28. And my friend girl, they were saying, you got a grown woman, 12 years old. She ain't bringing in no check. You a fool. You better get a check. She needs to be having her husband baby so she get a check. So I locked the mama up and had her to set no bond, charging her with an accessory to aggravated rape, which in Tennessee at the time, if the sex was with a girl 13 or under and she got pregnant, that was aggravated rape, especially aggravated rape, and no bond. And but see, that just a way of thinking. It isn't even looked at as wrong. Now you got R. Kelly.
Oh yeah, now that was sad. That was sad. He's a very talented person, very gifted. I liked some of his music. It's a little bit raunchy, but still, he had a gift. And if you
Well,
consider
see,
his,
but he's
yeah,
illiterate and
you're
he's
right.
got a problem. Some psychologist friends, male and female, said, man, what the dude's problem is he can't handle grown women, so he deals with these children.
And that's,
And
yeah,
what is her name? Aaliyah?
Aaliyah. Yeah.
He
Yeah.
still can't explain that away. Well, the parents said, okay, no, man, I don't
No,
care
it's
what
not
the
okay.
parents say. It's your thing, brother. You ain't supposed to go there. You
Yeah.
don't dip your wick in, junior grade,
Yeah. Well, last thing, Judge. I don't want to keep you too long. I appreciate yours has been very candid and it's been very enlightening. You mentioned the Reagan era, and it reminded me of something that Ibram X. Kendi said, that I was very skeptical of. He has been the champion of the redefinition of racism. Him and a bunch of other academics, especially. I think this really began with the critical race theory movement, Kimberly Crenshaw and the critical legal tradition, and all of them back in the 80s
I'm
coming
going to say
together.
something about
Yeah,
Professor
sure.
Crenshaw.
All right, coming together and basically deciding that racism is prejudice plus power as opposed to values or intentions. Now, what you described in that courtroom was indicative to me of racism being a value. Obviously, people in that courtroom saw Black people as inferior and bad, and so they use slurs. But now racism is considered to be a matter of power and a matter of disparity. So even if the intention is not there, if there's a disparity, there's racism. Kendi says that Reagan reforming the welfare system hurt Black people and caused a disparity. Ergo, Reagan's welfare policies were racist. What do you think about this new age definition of racism, and how does it match up? All right, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
The way I look at racism is a fact. It's a form of xenophobia, something that all humans possess. The distaste for the unknown, not necessarily fear.
Interesting.
Now, this whole thing, racism, is adversity.
Interesting.
Humans have always dealt with adversity. It may be a VC, Viet Cong, or NVA, North Vietnamese Army, somebody in the 1960s. It may be a jihadist in Afghanistan more recently. It may be something that some of the brothers over on the other side of the pond over in Africa call Simba. And I know personally some Africans that have killed their lion at 13 years old with a wooden spear as a rite of passage. So we can deal with adversity, and to be paralyzed by it is ridiculous. Now, let me tell you about Professor Crenshaw. 1967, myself, Clifford Stewart, now deceased, now Dr. Stewart, and also a Grand Master of Martial Arts, Harry Carey, Skip Johnson, and several professors. We were founding Black Studies and dealing with a minority affairs department that we were collaborating with the Hispanics, we called them Chicanos then, the Asians, the Native Americans, and so forth. So there was this hall called Campbell Hall that they want to tear down. We got them to let us have it to set this program up. Well, we drafted this prospectus on Black Studies as a Black Studies program to get Black students angry, to learn about the dynamics of racism and the country's history as it pertained to that, so we could go out and defeat it. Well, one of my former roommates, Harry, sent me something. He said, Joe, check this out. This has been a couple of years ago. He said, yeah, man, I forgot about that. He said, that's what we wrote up. I said, yeah, that whole thing. He said, now I'm going to send you something else. And he did. And I said, what? This is supposed to be critical race theory? Man, this is plagiarized straight out of what we did back 50 years ago. Wow. Except there's a difference. It's supposed to be an excuse and a give up, like there ain't no hope, it's all their fault.
Right.
You have to depend on them and convince them to change the way they are and give us what we are entitled to. Oh, hell no.
Yeah.
That's that begging crap. Like we had a thing, man. Excuse me, I don't know what the audience is, but James Brown did a takeoff on it, but he didn't come up with it. It was get the fuck out of my way and I'll do it my damn self. Black power.
Yeah, I'm black and proud. That's what James Brown. That's what James said. I'm black and
Yeah.
proud.
See, and I look at this thing where so much to date has been popularized as not I'm black and I'm proud. I am something and I'm ashamed. I want to change. That whole fluid gender thing. Oh my God, I'm not a man or I'm not a woman, and I want to be something else. You ain't proud of what you are. You want to change it. And see, media has put that thing in the head of so many where it's acceptable to be ashamed of what you are to the point of what you are doing is destroying what you are.
Exactly. Absolutely.
See, that's a bad thing. See, get into your own head. And I'll tell you something else bad, that N word. Many psychologists that I know, we get together and we hash it out, talk about it. When you say that N word, your subconscious knows what it means. And when you call yourself that, everybody you associate with that, your subconscious is picking it up. And every time you say it, you're chipping away at your own self-esteem without knowing it. I don't care what you say about, oh man, and he ain't got to be a real end, man. Like we say it with love.
Reclaiming the end.
Yeah, you're not reclaiming a damn thing. All you're doing is messing your own mind up. And every time you say it, you take a chisel and a hammer and you're going, bang, bang, bang of your self-esteem. Another chip of the granite is coming off and you're less capable of being able to deal with your own affairs. And I understand what Professor Crenshaw was doing is publish or perish. She wants to stay in the UCLA faculty. Now, Campbell Hall is no longer the center of minority affairs on the UCLA campus. It's now Bunch Hall, which was named after Ralph Bunch, who was a UCLA graduate, a black man who became
the ambassador.
No, he was a functionary with the UN. They weren't going to make him an ambassador at the time. So they named the biggest building on the campus after. It looks like a giant waffle iron on one side. But now they in there in that minority affairs. Oh, yes. Oh, wasn't the Chablis just a little bit off last night at the function? Oh, yes. And the Merlot was better. And, I'm beginning to get partial to Zinfandel. And wasn't the cheddar just so magnificent? It was aged 12 years. And like, what the hell? Do you folks know how this started? Do you know who Bunchy Carter is? I'm not sure. Well, Bunchy Carter and John Hudgens got killed at UCLA in April in front of 42 eyewitnesses. And I was in the building when it went down because there was a thing where Ron Everett, aka Ron Karinga, the Maulana with the US organization, was trying to take over that department and get appointed professor at UCLA. And he would be head of that department. And 4 folk came in there and they gunned down Bunchy and John in front of 42 witnesses. Now, yeah. And as a matter of fact, they ran upstairs to the 3rd floor where my office was when I was coming down with Elaine Brown. She wrote the book about it. And they put 4 bullet holes in the back of my chair. And they were trying to kill off some other folk that were affiliated with the Black Student Alliance and the BSU. It was rough in those days. But see, these people that are in there talking about their wine and cheese and cracker nibbling adventures when they go to the 5-star hotels and they sit in the leather chairs and they hobnob, see, in Bunch Hall now, and they're moving on up.
Man. It's an insult. It's an insult. It's an
Yeah, it
absolute
is. And
insult.
see, when I look at critical race theory, I say it's a crock of crap because it is plagiarized and I'll say that because it is, though I mean we didn't copyright it. What the hell? So I guess there's not any harm with it. But I
Well,
mean,
the
the point
principle,
was is
the
instead of
principle.
inspiring black students to get their shit together, get motivated and do what you needed to do. It was, oh my God, they need to give it to us. We deserve it because we've been treated so bad and they're all inherently evil. Like, man, come
Yeah,
on.
and really, what a lot of folks don't get, Judge, is that critical race theory is actually a rejection of the principles of the civil rights movement. Crenshaw and her band of people thought the civil rights movement and its emphasis on colorblindness was mistaken and didn't actually help minorities progress because you can't acknowledge the real issues according to them amongst Black people or minorities if you're colorblind. To them, being colorblind means that you're ignorant of minority struggle. And what do you think about that?
I think that when you give somebody an excuse to sit on his ass on a couch and smoke a blunt, play video games, you're not doing anybody a favor.
Right.
When you orient people to saying, we deserve it, we're entitled to it, they need to pay it. Well, you know, the reality of law, while we whoopee, is there's this thing about Pyrrhic victories all the time. You get something and so you win. What do you get? And then the other thing is the only way you're going to get reparations if you are cognizant about American law is by an Appropriations and Enablement Act by Congress, which you're not going to get. It has to be signed off on by the president, which, wow, we whoopee. Then it has to pass judicial muster when a whole lot of states are going to sue.
Right.
And for a reasonable amount to make it worthwhile, you're talking about 14 to 15 trillion dollars as a payout, which the United States simply does not have because its gross income 4 years ago, which is the last I looked, was somewhere around 19.4 trillion. And nobody but a damn fool is going to pay out that much of their income, let alone a government. So, I mean, you owe $38 trillion to the People's Republic of China. We can't afford to do it. Right. No, it ain't going to happen. Right. So, I mean, it would be nice, but it's like the lottery. Sometimes when it's big lottery, I go buy 10, 12, 15, sometimes 20 tickets. I can afford it, but you know, I'm not counting on it. It would be nice if. But when people, everything be all mad, man, if you just need to cut the check, man. Really? Yeah. Do you expect these people who have engaged in this long pattern and practice of racism, historically, contemporaneously, do you really expect them to all of a sudden develop a conscience and pay you? Where in the hell have you been? And see, in my lifetime, this is the third time reparations has come up. From talking to my parents, it came up 2 or 3 times with them. And my grandparents, who were born back in the 19th century, they were clamoring about when are we going to get our 40 acres and a mule? And frankly, for a while with paying back the few student loans I did have, which wound up paying back 10 cents on the dollar, I used to tell them, oh, the hell with you, man. This is the reasonable interest compounded the interest. This is just the interest compounded semi-annually at a reasonable rate on 40 acres and one goddamn mule from 1865. No, I ain't paying, but when they got him down that after years, 10 cents on the dollar, so what the hell, I'll get it out the way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, it's this thing that's bad for us. One other thing I think is bad about downing other black folk because they're from the Caribbean or Africa and they didn't pay attention. Hey, come over here and take advantage. Well, hell, man, you can't tell them looking at them that they came from Africa or the Caribbean. So what the hell, if they can do it, why can't you?
Or man, because
you got all that money. I said, well, I came out of South Central Los Angeles, dude. I went to John Muir, Budlong Avenue Elementary School, John Muir Junior High, and for a short time, Manual Arts, and then Dorsey High. What the hell? That's what even made Crenshaw High. What the devil, man? You can make it too. Just pay attention to what you're doing. Get that work ethic you were talking about.
There's also a habit
in what you do instead of doing a half-ass job.
There's a very bad habit of Black folks downing other Black folks that have different opinions. I am more right-leaning in my political opinions, and I have been called everything under the sun. I've been called an Uncle Tom. I've been called the C word. I don't like saying it. It sounds really nasty, but I'll say it. I've been called a coon. I've been called everything under the sun simply because I believe that America's principles are inherently good, even if our country has not always lived up to them, because I believe that there are traditions in this country that are worth preserving, because I believe that the individual is stronger when they're self-reliant and they're not relying on a handout. All of those things make me a white supremacist. They make me an Uncle Tom. They make me everything that's bad, and I don't understand. I don't get it.
So just here you go, Sean. Look at it this way. Just say, hey, brother, just because your mind is crippled, mine isn't, and you could do it if you put yourself into it. So hell with that. That's just you ever heard of Aesop's?
Fables.
The one about the sour grapes. The fox wanted the grapes, but he couldn't reach them, so he rationalized and said they're probably sour anyway.
Interesting.
That's what's going. See, brother, you into what they call sour grape. I don't know if you've ever read this stuff. You probably wouldn't, but truth is truth, fool. So you just mad at it because you can't get it. So that's your sorry ass. That's like you can't make the team, dude. Sit your ass on the bench and cheer.
Yeah. Have you ever been called those things before?
Seldom. And not to my face, because it's like, look, fool, I came up out of South Central LA. I played football at Dorsey and UCLA. And I've been taking martial arts for 56 years. You want to kick my ass? Hey, come on.
Yeah.
I might get a chance to try some shit I haven't tried in a long time. Come on.
Yeah.
And you're in Tennessee, and everybody here that is not the jailbird convict is packing iron. So come on.
Yeah.
I burned a lot of ammo at the range and off range for years and years.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I've been doing this for a half century. I ain't no rookie.
Oh, man.
So, hell. And by the way, see, we grew up in elementary, junior high, and high school. We used to run the dozens for recreation. Hey, man, your mama's so fat, man, she can't get in the swimming pool, let alone a bathtub, man. Just get a splash water in there. That's why she so funky, man. She can't even wash her nasty ass off. So it's like, hey, dude, just because your ass is funky, man, and hey, if you want to talk about being black, man, I done more for the cause. Yo, no good mama, your grandmama, your great grandmama, and I was probably fucking her too, man. But I used the rubber raincoat, so fuck you too.
You're
not probably, man. Look at me, man. I got it going on, and your mama probably give me some pussy, man. So what the hell?
Judge,
So you want to go there? Let's go there, you broke motherfucker. And another thing too, you want, man, where you trying to make it, you better be practicing to hold on to that soap. Unless you like dropping that shit, man. Drop that soap, man. Hey, they love your ass up in the penitentiary.
That's a real thing, right?
It's an approach.
Yeah.
Somebody wants to call you a coon. What the hell have you done, man? Give me your credentials, streetwise or otherwise. And I ain't talking about being a damn slave. You know what you can tell them? You know what a definition of a hood rat is? If it ain't a female, It's a lesbian with a boy's dick.
Oh man.
See, in the hood, lesbians in the hood rats are raised like girls because they ain't got a daddy around. They just got mom.
Oh man.
And some mamas okay, but a lot of them aren't. And they like nookie. Now, if the fairy god something or another waved the magic wand over the lesbian and she woke up tomorrow with a dick, there'd be no difference. And
Wow.
what's wrong with the picture? I ain't got nothing wrong against the sister who, had an accident. She's doing the best she can. But when you got 7, 8, 9, 10, and 6, 7 different baby daddies, something wrong with you. You acting like a cow on a cattle ranch and somebody's
Wow.
breeding you. What the hell's wrong with you? And the other thing,
Wow.
too, I used to run a counseling session. To get in there, you had to be a woman, single parent, head of household. You had to have a kid in the city school system at the time. It's been 25 years ago, 26, 27. And it had to be a boy between 13 and 17. So, okay, fine. Every time we'd start a new counseling group, blah, 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 blah. Well, Judge, let me ask you something. With due respect, what you need a man around for anyway? I hear you, girlfriend. Man ain't nothing but no dog. They ain't good for nothing but one thing. I hear you, friend.
Bad
Talking about
mentality.
and then I'd say, now there you go. That's why you need to be in here. Now you want your boys to grow up to be men? Of course we want them to be men. I said, well, you don't need a man to raise them, right? Yeah, what you need a man for? We just got through talking about that. I said, well, let me put this to you. How the hell you gonna raise your boy to be a man and you don't know what the fuck they good for?
Wow. That's a very
They
good.
just wilted. Now that I got your attention, pay attention.
That's a very good question. I wish more. I mean, do you remember Kevin Samuels at all?
Yes.
Well, he
I
challenged.
interviewed him a couple of times.
Oh, okay. Well, he, for all of his flaws and everything, he challenged that mentality that a lot of women have right now, that men, they don't need men and masculinity is bad and it's poisonous. I think he really challenged that, particularly amongst Black Americans. And I didn't always agree with his approach. Sometimes he was very materialistic, what's your dress size and things like that. But a lot, look, I mean, if people consider that stuff in the dating world. So it came from someplace. And I think that he did a service, even if it wasn't always the nicest thing in the world, even if it wasn't always the most gentle thing in the world, he did a service. And I think that a lot of people miss out on that because they miss that because they look at his tone instead. What do you think?
Well, you know what? You know what he was doing? What preachers used to do. I haven't heard preachers do that in 30 years. They used to get on folk about sin. This is wrong. You shouldn't do this. First thing, if you're going to be right, you have to know when you're doing wrong and get some suggestions. That's what the preachers used to do about sin. Now they talk about his belief. I haven't heard a preacher preach about sin and use that word in years, decades. And I know a bunch of them and I get on them. Now, when you going to start talking about sin again? Or are you worried about your wife wanting that Bentley that she's been talking about? You don't want to jeopardize getting that Bentley. See, you going to hell, brother. Oh, Jojo, no, you're going to hell. See, if there is one, you're going because you tried to sit there in those shekels and
Creflo
that's
dollars.
more important to you than saving the souls, which you're trying to take this money from these folk. You just tell them to believe. And I've even heard some folk think they get to heaven by doing good deeds, but you won't see the pearly gates unless you believe in Jesus. You can be a pimp, a hoe, a drug dealer, a murderer, or a thief. And if you believe, you will go to heaven. No. See, what he did may have been harsh, but he needed to say it. See, we have to stop. There's some beautiful Black women out there who act like real women. And some of them not only act like real women, they act like ladies. Doesn't get any better than that. But you see, what happens is there's all this mythology. It's like, I don't need a man. I'm better than a man. And I'm going to mess these boys up so I can rank out somebody else's daughter who will run into one of my punked out sons when he gets grown, who doesn't know how to be a man, where he doesn't defend his neighborhood, he wrecks it. He doesn't impose peace, dignity, and order. He's a burglar and he's selling poison, he's raping and he's breaking and entering and he's gang banging and thugging. And he wants to share his music from 3 blocks away with everybody who doesn't want to listen to it. That is not cool, and that's not what men do.
Agreed. Okay, Judge. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been an enlightening conversation. I appreciate it. It means the world to me. Do you have any final words before we close up here?
Yeah, I got a product. I'm doing 2 things. I'm running for mayor, JJB, for mayor of Memphis in 2023, send Brown downtown. And there's another one too with the same initials. I sell sauce. Judge Joe Brown barbecue. JJB, Judge Joe Brown barbecue, BBQ.com. Go there and order some. We've got some products and it'll be the best damn sauce you've ever bought. You might be able to fix something better, but I doubt it. I would even recommend, since I invented the stuff, that what you do is thin it down 1/3 with beer or malt vinegar, because I like it thinner, but it's good stuff. It's not this ketchup-based nonsense. It's pretty damn good. And we have seasoning, and we will be on shelves shortly. And I just signed an agreement with a large online retail establishment that delivers. So we will see what happens. I would suggest you get the 3 bottles because the shipping is most expeditious with that.
Yeah.
And you'll enjoy yourself. Everybody that's tasted it enjoys it. So JJBBBQ.com. Get you something. And it's been my pleasure. I'm just an old man pontificating, trying to get things straight. And I'm writing a book with some of the adventures. It's not so much on biography as it is observations in life. And you can catch me on Twitter at Judge Joe Brown TV. And I do not have a blue check. They refuse to believe it's me, or at least they act like it. And they shadow block the hell out of me because they don't like what I say. But I get an audience and the word gets around and there is some impact. So join on in, come check it out. Judge Joe Brown TV.
All right.
On Twitter.
Yeah.
All right. Now I'm out of here. How about and got to go? This has been Judge Joe. Catch me when you can, because I'm the one that ran. I'm out of here. Hey, good luck, young man. I'm glad I gave you the contact 411.
Good seeing you. And everybody,
all right, son. Be good. Send me a copy where I can find it. You know, I might use it for the mayor's campaign.
Of course. Of course.
All right.
All right. You have a nice day, Judge.